Have you ever wondered why the United States, the world's largest oil producer, still can't rely solely on its own oil? It's a bit like a farmer who grows wheat on his own land, but still has to buy bread from someone else. The world we live in often looks simple on the surface, but when you dig deeper, reality is often the exact opposite of what it seems. For example, every year millions of shipping containers travel from China to the United States. But why do many of those containers end up abandoned in American junkyards? And in the middle of all this, another strange question appears. How did Iran secretly acquire several Boeing 777 aircraft despite heavy international sanctions? Welcome back to Libas Official. Today we're diving into some of the strangest hidden stories behind the global economy. Right now, at any given moment, there are roughly 300,000 ships sailing across the world's oceans. These include oil tankers, LPG carriers, LNG carriers, tugboats, passenger ships, and perhaps most importantly, container ships, the vessels that keep the global economy moving. Around 90% of global trade travels by sea. According to estimates, between 6,000 and 8,000 container ships are traveling across the oceans every single minute. Today, thanks to tracking systems like AIS, Automatic Identification System, you can actually watch these ships move in real time. If you open websites like Marine Traffic or Vessel Finder, the entire ocean looks like it's covered with tiny lights. Each light represents a massive ship carrying cargo worth millions of dollars. Most of these container ships are traveling from China to Europe and the United States. Here's the surprising part. The average container ship carries about 5,000 containers. That means roughly 40 million containers are traveling across the oceans at any given time. Almost everything we use, from our clothes to our smartphones, once traveled inside one of these containers.
At first glance, the system seems simple. Goods are shipped to a country, and the empty containers return. But the reality is far more complicated. The balance of global trade is completely uneven. China exports far more goods than it imports. In 2023, China recorded a trade surplus of over $823 billion. That means China exported about $3.38 trillion worth of goods, while importing only $2.56 trillion. The real problem begins when those containers reach the United States and Europe. While China has a massive trade surplus, the entire European Union has a surplus of only about $41 billion, nearly 95% smaller than China's. But when containers reach the United States, the imbalance becomes even more obvious. The US is the largest consumer market in the world. America imports far more goods than it exports. That means containers arrive in huge numbers, but there simply aren't enough American products to fill them for the return trip. Only about 40% of containers leaving US ports are actually full. So what happens to the remaining 60%? You might assume they simply return empty, but that's not always the case. Across the United States, thousands of shipping containers end up sitting in junkyards and storage lots. Why? Because sending an empty container back to China costs around $3,000. It also takes up valuable cargo space on a ship, space that could instead carry a container full of goods worth tens of thousands of dollars. From China's perspective, there's no reason to bring back an old container when they can simply manufacture a brand new one for about $2,000. Every year, roughly 2.5 million new containers are built, mostly in China. So what happens to the unused containers sitting in the US and Europe? Some are sold cheaply for storage. Others are turned into construction materials. In recent years, people have even started building homes and offices out of shipping containers. And when containers are no longer useful, they're melted down for steel. Each container contains about 2 tons of steel. So the next time you pass by a port and see stacks of steel containers piled on top of each other, remember, they're not just scrap metal. They are a symbol of the massive imbalance in the global economy. Now let's return to the question that confuses even experts. If the United States is the largest oil producer in the world, why does it still import oil? In fact, the US not only produces the most oil, it's also the second largest oil importer in the world. That means America sells its own oil overseas while buying oil from other countries for domestic use. There are three major reasons behind this strange situation. The first reason is oil chemistry. Not all crude oil is the same. Most of the oil produced in the United States is light crude oil, which has lower viscosity and flows more easily. But many American refineries were originally designed to process heavy crude oil. These refineries were built decades ago when the U.S. was importing heavy crude from countries like Mexico and Venezuela. Converting those refineries to process lighter crude would require enormous investments, estimated at over $200 billion. So instead of upgrading the refineries, American companies simply export their light crude at high prices and import cheaper heavy crude from abroad. The second reason is logistics. Oil production in the United States often happens far away from where it's needed. For example, huge amounts of oil are produced in Texas, but there aren't enough pipelines to transport it efficiently to places like the East Coast.
California faces an even stranger situation. Due to limited pipeline connections, California effectively operates like an energy island, importing nearly 70% of its oil from other countries. But the final piece of the puzzle is a law called the Jones Act. After World War I, the U.S. realized it didn't have enough ships to transport troops and supplies during wartime. To fix this, Congress passed the Jones Act. The law requires that any cargo transported between two U.S. ports must be carried on ships that are built in the United States, owned by Americans, and operated by American crews. At the time, the law was meant to protect national security and support the American shipping industry. But today, building ships in the U.S. is about 3 times more expensive than building them in China, and American crews are also far more expensive. As a result, there are very few ships available for domestic transport. Moving oil from Texas to New York on a U.S.-compliant ship can add about $5 per barrel in shipping costs. Because of this, it can actually be cheaper for American refineries to import oil from overseas rather than transport oil within their own country. A law that was originally designed to protect the United States has slowly become a burden on its own economy. Now let's shift to another fascinating story: Iran and the mysterious Boeing 777 aircraft. For years, the United States has imposed strict economic sanctions on Iran. These sanctions prevent Iran from buying or selling many goods, especially aircraft and aviation parts, from the U.S. and its allies. Yet Iran's airline Mahan Air somehow operates a fleet that includes several American-made Boeing aircraft. In 2024 and 2025, the world was shocked when 5 Boeing 777 aircraft suddenly appeared in Iran. This operation was the result of a long and complicated plan. In the Australian desert near Alice Springs, there is a massive aircraft storage facility, sometimes called an airplane graveyard. 5 old, but still functional Boeing 777s from Singapore Airlines were parked there. Iran couldn't buy these aircraft directly due to sanctions, so the planes were first purchased through a US-based company called Iron Aviation. From there, they were transferred to China and later sold again to a fake company in Madagascar called Udon Aviation. These companies existed only on paper to hide the real buyer. Once the aircraft were registered under the Madagascar flag, they were no longer directly controlled by U.S. aviation authorities. The planes were then flown to Cambodia, where aviation regulations are relatively loose. There, the aircraft essentially disappeared from public attention. In July 2025, the planes filed flight plans claiming they were heading to Kenya for maintenance. But when they reached the airspace over Afghanistan, where monitoring is relatively weak, the pilots switched off their transponders. Once they vanished from radar, the aircraft changed course and flew directly into Iran, landing in cities like Chabahar, Zahedan, and Mashhad. By the time the world realized what had happened, the 5 Boeing 777s had already joined Mahan Air's fleet. And legally, there was little the United States could do. The companies involved were registered under different names, making it difficult to prove sanctions violations. Today, Mahan Air operates 50 to 60 aircraft, most of them Airbus models, but several are American Boeing jets. These planes still fly internationally and use foreign airspace. Under the Chicago Convention on International Civil Aviation, Countries generally cannot block civilian aircraft from using their airspace unless they are at war. However, due to sanctions, many countries refuse to refuel Iranian aircraft, making their operations more difficult. But if Western countries completely block Iranian airlines, Iran could retaliate by closing its airspace to their flights. That would force airlines traveling between the Middle East and Europe to take much longer routes. And that could cost the global aviation industry billions. We hope you enjoyed today's episode from Liba's Official. If you found this story interesting, don't forget to like, share, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.